So now in our topic number 4, let's come ahead to the concept of the types of banks. As I said in the previous session, that we'll be continuing with the types of banks. We have different types of banks, the different variety of banks in functioning for us. Commonly, we are aware of only and only the cooperative banks and the commercial banks. In fact, cooperative banks also are the part of commercial banks only. But primarily, we are aware about only these two banks. And moreover, recently, as there is the evolvement of the new concept that is payments bank, that is what we have been knowing about. Otherwise, we were not aware about majority of the banks which are existing as of now. And that's why we need to learn these all banks, the types of banks in detail. The very first in that is the central bank. The central bank here does not mean the Central Bank of India. Actually, मैं जब गांव में रहा करता था अमरावती में, वहां एक बंदा था जो सेंट्रल बैंक ऑफ इंडिया में काम करता था. Central Bank of India is one of the commercialized bank, one of the commercial bank which is nationalized by the government. That's a public sector bank. ये बंदे ने लिखा हुआ था XYZ, whatever was the name of that person, manager CBI. And then the people would get kind of, वो थोड़े से दूर रहते थे उससे, भाई सीबीआई में काम करता है. और बाद में जाके जब मुझे वो लोगो समझ में आया, उसके बोर्ड पे ना वो लोगो भी लगा हुआ था सीबीआई का, मतलब सेंट्रल बैंक ऑफ इंडिया का, तब जाके समझ में आया ये सीबीआई फीबीआई कुछ नहीं है, ये बैंक में काम करता है और बैंक का मैनेजर है. सो होता है ऐसे भी. Here the central bank that we are talking about is basically the federal bank, what we have in the form of Reserve Bank of India. A bank which may not be dealing in with the people, with the public at large, but which is dealing with the banks as such. जो हमारे शक्तिकांत दास साहब जो आते हैं, जो गवर्नर हैं, he is basically the governor of RBI. For us, it is the central bank. All right. So the central bank is the apex financial institution. I'll just share the screen. Or you have the text already? तो मैं screen share नहीं करता हूँ.
है सर.
है ना सबके पास? Okay. The central bank is the apex financial institution in the banking industry in the country. Every country has their own central bank, and the Reserve Bank of India is the central bank for us. The RBI was established in 1945 under the Reserve Bank of India Act of 1944. Some of the functions of RBI are to issue the currency, क्योंकि ये लोग इंडिविजुअल्स के साथ डील नहीं करते हैं, बट ये इंडिविजुअल्स के हाथ तक के पैसा कैसे पहुंचे उस पर फोकस रखते हैं. ऑलराइट. फ्रेम्स द मॉनेटरी पॉलिसीज. अभी जो कोविड सिचुएशन आई थी, इस पीरियड में अगर आपने ऑब्जर्व किया रहेगा, कई बार शक्तिकांत दास साहब खुद आए थे और ही मेड अ लॉट मेनी अनाउंसमेंट्स. निर्मला सीतारामन मैडम तो आ ही रही थी for making the kind of useless comments and the useless reforms. उसमें से एक ही सिर्फ MSME के लिए जो उन्होंने रिफॉर्म्स लाए थे, वही that was the only workable reform. Otherwise than that, I never felt that anything she had announced was something useful for the society. वो गेहूं और धान बेचना वैसे फ्री में देना, वो उनका काम वैसे भी नहीं था. वो तो मतलब जो होम मिनिस्ट्री है उन्होंने अनाउंस करना चाहिए था, या कॉमर्स मिनिस्ट्री ने अनाउंस करना चाहिए था. But anyways, हम लोग 20 लाख का पैकेज लाएंगे, 20 लाख करोड़ का, इनफैक्ट 20 लाख करोड़ का पैकेज लाएंगे, और उसके इंस्टॉलमेंट्स दिए उन्होंने, लोगों को खुश कर रहे थे. और जब जब मैडम अनाउंसमेंट करने आती थी, तब तब शेयर मार्केट 200 पॉइंट से नीचे जाता था, बिकॉज ऑल द अनाउंसमेंट्स वर द रुथलेस अनाउंसमेंट्स. But anyways, she is having her own prerogatives which she has been using. The RBI would act as the banker for the government. वो एस्टैब्लिशमेंट ईयर एंड एक्ट के डेट्स में गड़बड़ है क्या? इट हैज टू बी 1935 एंड 34. I'll just check it out because it should not be the case. जनरली ऐसा नहीं होता है. इकोनॉमिक्स में आपके पास अलग डेट्स है. Let me just check it out. RBI Act. क्योंकि ये लोग नॉर्मली कॉपी पेस्ट ही करते हैं. ये अपना दिमाग बहुत कम चलाते हैं. Yes, 1934 and 35 it should be. There's a typing error. You just change it in your answer, in your text. Here it is 1935 and here it is 1934. आज तक कभी इस लॉ को पढ़ा ही नहीं ना हमने, आरबीआई एक्ट को, तो ईयर वगैरह के साथ में कोई संबंध ही नहीं आए थे. हाँ, ढंग से कॉपी पेस्ट भी नहीं करते हैं लोग. बेटा वो प्रूफ रीडिंग में कुछ तो गलती की उन्होंने. ठीक है, कोई नहीं. तू तेरे जैसे बंदे नहीं ना उनके पास. काश उनके पास हर्षद जोशी जैसे बंदे होते तो आज तो सिचुएशन ही बदल जाती. एकदम जज्बात ही बदल दिए तूने उनके. वेल, it acts as, now it is the bank to the now government, central bank for us RBI and other banks. So it is banker to the government as well as other banks. अदर बैंक्स के पास एक्सेस पैसा पड़ा है, वो उठा के आरबीआई के पास भेज देते हैं. आरबीआई के पास एक्सेस पैसा पड़ा है, वो अदर बैंक्स के पास पहुंचा देती है. मेंटेन देयर सीआरआर, एसएलआर, एटसेट्रा. आफ्टर दैट व्हाटएवर इज द सिचुएशन, they transfer the funds to each other. These transfers normally are done at the interest, and that interest is what you call as the repo rate. जो बैंक्स अपना पैसा आरबीआई को दे रही है या आरबीआई से बोरो करती है, तो एट दैट टाइम द रेट दोज अप्लाई आर द रेपो रेट्स एंड रिवर्स रेपो रेट्स. ऑलराइट, next one, there is the commercial banks. Now very basic understanding of all the banks is what we have to have. We are not going to go into the details. More important details are related to the functions of the bank that will be important for us. The commercial banks play an important role in economic and social development of the country. Why? Because they mobilize the funds. हमारे देश में जब बैंकिंग इंडस्ट्री डेवलप हो रही थी, उस समय पे the core interest that the banks were having, the core function that the banks were given was to mobilize the funds. Mobilization of funds means what? कि जिन लोगों के पास सेविंग्स हैं, जिन लोगों के पास सरप्लस फंड्स अवेलेबल है, उनसे आप पैसा कैप्चर करो, और जिन लोगों को पैसे की एक्चुअल जरूरत है उनके यहां आप पैसा इन्वेस्ट करो. आप सपोज मैं यहाँ पे ऐसा बंदा बैठा हूं जिसको सपोज 1 लाख भर रुपए की जरूरत है. मुझे अगर 1 लाख भर रुपए मिलेगा, मैं बिजनेस में लगाएगा, उसमें से प्रॉफिट कमाएगा और वो प्रॉफिट से मैं बैंक को इंटरेस्ट देगा. और वहीं जीबी सर जैसे बंदे बैठे हैं जिनके पास सरप्लस फंड्स अवेलेबल है एंड ही वांट्स टू इन्वेस्ट इट समवेयर. अब जीबी सर को जब तक मैं मिलूं नहीं तब तक के वो, और फिर मेरे नाम पे खातरी, मेरे नाम पे कॉन्फिडेंस उनको अब है, वैसी कोई बात नहीं है, बट वो कॉन्फिडेंस क्रिएट करना एटसेट्रा इंडिविजुअली इट बिकम्स अ प्रॉब्लम. So for that purpose, as an alternate, as an intermediary, the banks that work is the commercial bank. They basically provide the biggest function of accepting the deposits and providing the loans against that. All right. So the commercial banks play an important role in economic and social development of the country. Because the commercial banks perform the important functions such as primary functions of accepting the deposit and lending the money, and secondary functions or agency functions and utility functions. In India, the commercial banks are divided into three: public sector, private sector, and foreign bank. What are public sector banks? The banks in which the majority of the investment is that of the government. Public sector banks include the nationalized banks also. There is a difference between nationalized banks and public sector banks. However, all the nationalized and public sector banks are now been getting merged. If you'd be observing, one of the announcement that Sitaraman madam did was to merge, to consolidate the different banks. उनकी फंक्शनैलिटीज को कंसिडर करते हुए उन्होंने पीएनबी के साथ में कुछ बैंक्स को मर्ज किया, यूनियन बैंक के साथ किसी को मर्ज किया, अलग अलग मल्टीपल ऑफ द बैंक्स दे हैव मर्ज्ड इट. Why they did the mergers and acquisitions? Because they want to make the banks compatible to the private sector. अब तक क्या हो रहा था? अब इंडियन बैंक और देना बैंक और यूनियन बैंक ये आपस में ही झगड़ा कर रही है. इनके तीनों के ब्रांचेस एक ही जगह पे लोकेटेड है, आपस में ही झगड़ा कर रही है. एक कस्टमर, अब एक कस्टमर को कितना खाओगे, कितने लोग खाओगे? इससे अच्छा तीनों एक साथ आ जाओ और एक साथ खाएंगे. So that becomes more easier and they become larger banks and they will be able to compete with the private sector banks also. And for that purpose, they did these mergers. So public sector banks are basically those in which the majority of the investment is that of the government. जहां पे प्राइवेट सेक्टर इंडिविजुअल्स के पैसे कम लगे हुए हैं, दैट इज व्हाट यू कॉल एज अ पब्लिक सेक्टर बैंक. मेजॉरिटी मींस मोर देन 51% शेयर होल्डिंग इज विद द गवर्नमेंट. ऑलराइट, the next one, that the private sector bank which are not held by government as such, which are held by individuals and the private group of people, that is what you call as the private banks. जैसे हम लोग हमारे पूर्वजों की बैंक आईसीआईसीआई, this bank is a private sector bank. Kotak Mahindra Bank is a private bank. Axis Bank, HDFC Bank, they have given the names of that. Even the new banks which have been coming now, those are also the kind of private sector banks. Then foreign banks, the banks whose location is outside India, whose registration is outside India, but they are having the activities in India. They are called as the foreign banks. हमारे देश में जो मेजरली लोकेटेड है, डॉइश बैंक, सिटी बैंक, एचएसबीसी, स्टैंडर्ड चार्टर्ड, एंजल ग्रिनलेट्स, these all are the foreign banks. These will be categorized as private foreign banks. Why private foreign banks? Because their owning is not with the government, their owning is with their respective countries, and they're having the registration outside India, and that's why they'll be called as the foreign banks for us. लाइक हमारी किसी बैंक का अगर किसी फॉरेन कंट्री में जाके ब्रांच होता है, देन इन दैट केस फॉर देम वी विल बिकम फॉरेन बैंक. सिमिलर टू दैट, अगर सपोज किसी बाहर की कंट्री की बैंक आपके देश में होती है, तो दैट विल आल्सो बी कॉल्ड एज अ फॉरेन बैंक फॉर अस. देन कोऑपरेटिव बैंक, वन ऑफ द वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट एस्पेक्ट फॉर द रूरल बैंकिंग, क्योंकि हर रूरल सेगमेंट में नेशनलाइज बैंक्स को, प्राइवेट बैंक्स को पहुंचने में अरसे लग जाएंगे. इनफैक्ट गवर्नमेंट हैड रन अ स्कीम कॉल्ड एज लीड बैंकर स्कीम, जिसकी वजह से बहुत डिटेल में हमारे पास बैंकिंग फैसिलिटीज अवेलेबल है. अलग अलग जगहों पे बहुत ज्यादा हमारे पास बैंकिंग फैसिलिटीज अवेलेबल है. बट नाउ those banking facilities are further expanded through these cooperative banks. There are so many cooperative. Now, cooperative bank and nationalized bank or the commercial bank, what is the difference between the two? Commercial bank mein majorly the control is done by RBI. In fact, now in the cooperative banking also, the control has got vested to the RBI only. Earlier it was not, but now it has vested to the RBI. Very recently the changes were made in that. So RBI will give the guidelines even to the cooperative banks. Earlier the cooperative banks were governed separately. In India, the cooperative banks are registered under the Indian Cooperative Societies Act and regulated under the Banking Regulation Act. Cooperative banks are popular in semi-urban and rural areas, majorly in the rural areas. लाइक अगर आप गांव चले जाओ वहां पे आपको दिखेगा अकोला अर्बन कोऑपरेटिव बैंक लिमिटेड, और फॉर दैट मैटर बुल्ढाना अर्बन क्रेडिट कोऑपरेटिव सोसाइटी, या फिर वो डोंबिवली नागरी सहकारी बैंक लिमिटेड, थाने जनता सहकारी बैंक लिमिटेड. नाउ these all सहकारी, the moment they use the term as सहकारी, that means that's a cooperative bank. Sahkar means cooperation, and they are coming together. Now here there is a group of people. Rupi Bank is also a cooperative bank. It's not a private bank. Yes, so many of this, so many of those. रूपी बैंक का एग्जांपल कहां से लेके आए यश? ऑलरेडी बंद होने की कगार पे बैंक है, बंद हो गई है एक्चुअली. अभी तो वो उसको कोई टेकर भी नहीं मिल रहा है बेचारों को. हम लोग इतने टाइम से बोल रहे हैं वो जगह खाली करो, हमको दे दो, हमारे क्लासरूम हो जाएंगे वहां पे, वो खाली करने के लिए भी तैयार नहीं है. वेल एनीवेज, cooperative banks are popular in semi-urban and rural areas. The main aim of cooperative banks is to provide credit to the economically backward people. आजकल वैसा सिस्टम नहीं रह गया है. Gone are the days when they were giving the support only to the economically backward people. Now they are giving the loans to the larger organizations also. Generally, the cooperative bank works at three different levels. Now, in this, the credit cooperative societies that they are talking about, this credit cooperative society is basically a kind of a credit society. They do not get governed by the Banking Regulation Act also. Like the best example for this, if I would give you, is the Buldhana Urban Credit Cooperative Society. They perform the similar functions as to the banks, but not all the functions of the bank. The major functions of the bank, that is acceptance of deposit and giving the loans, that is what is the major function of the cooperatives, is what they follow. Why are there many scams in cooperative banks? अरे भाई साहब, जहां पे सहकार होगा वहां पे स्कैम होना आसान हो जाता है ना. अथर, if there is a cooperation, then making the fraud becomes more easier. वो पब्लिक से पैसा उठाने का और अपने ही पहचान वाले लोगों को पैसा देने का इन द फॉर्म ऑफ लोन, एंड देन डोंट पे इट बैक. Yes, more kind of insider trading. They also get funds from the state cooperative bank and district cooperative banks for the purpose of lending. जैसे commercial banks can borrow the funds from the RBI. Similarly, the cooperative societies can get the funds from the state cooperative bank or the district cooperative bank. Like Pune में Pune district cooperative bank है. If you go to Aurangabad, there you will find Aurangabad District Cooperative Bank. So every district has got their own respective cooperative bank, which is the apex body for that respective district. Then District Central Cooperative Bank. These banks operate at district level because they are working at the working as the apex body for all the cooperative banks in that respective district. So they obtain deposits from public at district level and also get funds from the state cooperative bank for the purpose of lending. The state cooperative bank, so three levels. सबसे नीचे की लेवल होती है जो आपकी लोकल लेवल की कोऑपरेटिव सोसाइटी या कोऑपरेटिव बैंक होती है. उसके ऊपर की लेवल आपके डिस्ट्रिक्ट कोऑपरेटिव बैंक, एंड टॉप विद इन द स्टेट इज द स्टेट कोऑपरेटिव बैंक. This bank operates at the state level. They provide funds to the central cooperative bank and primary credit cooperative societies as required. The state cooperative bank also perform function of monitoring over district cooperative bank and the credit cooperative societies. So they do not deal with the individuals, they deal with the societies and banks. It is bankers for the bank again. Industrial development banks, these are basically the organizations which are formed for the purpose of developing the industries in our country. Like हमारे यहाँ जो MIDC होती है, जैसे महाराष्ट्र की बात करूं अगर तो मैं, महाराष्ट्र इंडस्ट्रियल डेवलपमेंट कॉर्पोरेशन, यहाँ अगर आपने इंडस्ट्री लगाई तो यू कैन बोरो द फंड्स फ्रॉम द SFCs, यू कैन बोरो द फंड्स फ्रॉम IFCI, यू कैन बोरो द फंड्स फ्रॉम MSFC. Now these in fact have gone already into the bankruptcy, but still those are existing. आजकल कोई इंडस्ट्रियल डेवलपमेंट कॉर्पोरेशन वाला बंदा जो इंडस्ट्री डेवलप कर रहा है, वो बंदा भी जाके किसी एमएसएफसी एसएफसी से पैसा नहीं उठाता है आजकल बंदा नहीं। आईडीबीआई इज अ डिफरेंट कंसेप्ट। IDBI Bank it has become now. IDBI is no more in existence. IDBI का वो अस्तित्व लगभग लगभग खत्म हो गया है। And IDBI it can be considered as SIDBI, Small Industrial Development Bank of India. Those are the specialized banks. That will be a different category. We are going to talk about that. Yes. So these are the financial institutions that provide medium and long-term funds to the business firm. Examples of development banks are IFCI, SFC, MSFC. Some functions of development banks are provision of medium to long-term funds to business units for the purpose of expansion and modernization, underwriting of shares issued by public limited companies, and purchase of debentures and bonds. In fact, these are the secondary functions of the commercial banks as well. Nowadays, in fact, as I said earlier also, if you can check out, अगर आप गूगल करोगे तो आपको पता चल जाएगा कि एसएफसी, एमएसएफसी, आईएफसीआई इनका एग्जिस्टेंस लगभग लगभग ना के बराबर हो गया है, बिकॉज कमर्शियल बैंक्स हैव बिकम मोर एक्टिव। जब कमर्शियल बैंक्स उतनी एक्टिव नहीं थी, जब कमर्शियल बैंक्स की उतनी वैल्यू नहीं हुआ करती थी, उस समय पे दीज ऑल वर हैविंग अ लॉट ऑफ वैल्यूज, बट नाउ दैट कंसेप्ट इज ऑलमोस्ट गॉन। Exchange banks, these are basically the banks which are dealing into the foreign exchange and the foreign transactions. That is what they call as the exchange banks. The exchange banks as well as large commercial banks facilitates foreign exchange transactions. The example nowadays, in fact, foreign exchange transaction has now, अब जब जैसे मैं आपको एग्जांपल बताऊं, हम लोग जब आपके साथ डील कर रहे हैं ऑनलाइन, तो हमको वो जूम के अकाउंट के लिए हर महीने पैसा देना होता है। लगभग लगभग 18 से 20 हजार रुपए हर महीने जाता है पर हेड। अब ये जो 18-20 हजार रुपए, 25 हजार रुपए जो हम खर्च करना पड़ता है, डिपेंड्स ऑन द कैपेसिटीज दैट वी आर टेकिंग। तो ये जो 18, 20, 25, 30 जो भी हजार जाते हैं, इसके लिए ना मुझे कहीं किसी बैंक में जाना होता है, ना ही किसी को स्विफ्ट अकाउंट में ट्रांसफर करने होते हैं, नथिंग ऑफ दैट काइंड। माय कार्ड गेट्स स्वाइप्ड ऑटोमेटिकली। I've given the standing instruction to the card company that whenever this Zoom company comes, you just pay the money to them. So therefore, exchange banks as such is no more a concept now. Nowadays, the exchange can be done, the letter of credits can be taken from any and everywhere. Every commercial bank is for performing all the functions which are being given here, financing the foreign transactions, issuing the letter of credit, discounting the bills of exchange, remittances of dividend, interest and profits, etc. These all functions are performed even by the commercial banks as well in the current scenario. All right. But there was and there is the existence of these kind of banks also even in the current scenario. Then regional rural banks. Now these are the specialized category banks. आपने 11th standard अगर आपको याद होगा तो 11th standard में आपके पास था the small scale sector, और small scale sector के लिए जो support के लिए banks बनाई गई थी, उसमें से one of the prominent one was regional rural bank, which were established in 1975. These banks are sponsored by the large public sector banks. The capital of RRB is contributed by central government, state government, and sponsored banks. The RRBs mobilize the deposits primarily from the rural and semi-urban areas, like the cooperative banks also do the same, and provide loans and advances mostly to the small and marginal farmers, agricultural laborers, and rural artisans. This is a very, very limited scope for the RRBs or the regional rural banks. सेविंग्स बैंक नाम की कोई कंसेप्ट नहीं होती है। इस तरह के अकाउंट होते हैं। पोस्ट ऑफिस में जाके आप सेविंग्स बैंक अकाउंट ओपन करो। इनफैक्ट पोस्ट ऑफिस has also become a payment bank now. They have also got the banking license. कमर्शियल बैंक्स, कोऑपरेटिव बैंक्स, हर जगह पे सेविंग्स बैंक होता है। तो इस तरह की कोई बैंक नहीं होती है। ये आप लिखना भी मत, आपके आंसर में जस्ट डिलीट है। हाँ, इन्वेस्टमेंट बैंक्स, आजकल जो कई सारी जगहों पे आपको इन्वेस्टमेंट्स की जरूरत पड़ती है, no, PPF can also be done through commercial banks now. Athar, PPF is a different concept. Public Provident Fund and Savings Bank are different concepts. The investment banks provide financial and advisory assistance to their customers. Their clients generally include the business firms and government organizations. The investment banks facilitate mergers and acquisitions by undertaking the research and providing advice on investment decisions. Generally, investment banks do not directly deal with the general public. Write down the points there. The investment banks, the investment banks do not perform the investment banks do not perform general banking functions as their major business as their major business is focused on is focused on advisory and due diligence. Due diligence means basically verifying, checking, and confirming whether the merger and acquisition can be done or not, something like that. Advisory and due diligence. Am I right? Yeah, the next one, that is the specialized banks. The banks which are made for the specific purpose, the banks which are having the specialized characteristics, the banks which are going to perform the specific category of functions only, that is why they are called as the specialized banks. Now within that, if you refer the very first, that is the Exim Bank, Export and Import Bank. No, Religare is not an investment banker. Religare cannot perform the investment banking function. Edelweiss has got the investment banking function, and there are some more. This bank provides financial assistance to exporters and importers and functions as the prime principal financial institution for coordinating the working of institutions engaged in financing export and import of the goods and services with a view to promoting the country's international trade. In fact, the Exim Bank not only perform the function of funding, the giving the financial assistance to the exporters and importers, but also provide the training. They're one of the larger segment in the current scenario is providing training for the export and import. So right down the line there also, Exim Bank has expanded its functions and currently provides the training and education as well. The training and education as well in the export and import segment. In the export and import segment. Am I right? The next one, SIDBI, which was basically formed for the MSME sector, which was basically for the people who were into MSME. Currently, MSME is into the prime focus of the government, and that should be the case. क्योंकि अगर आप MSME को सपोर्ट नहीं करोगे तो आपका बिजनेस ग्रो नहीं होगा. Yes, Exims provide the loan as well as training. Jay. Yeah. The Small Industrial Development Bank of India, set up on 2nd April 1990 under an Act of Indian Parliament, acts as a principal financial institution for promotion, financing and development of MSME, as well as for coordination of functions of institutions engaged in the similar activities. अब suppose MSME हर जगह खुद फंडिंग नहीं करती है, they are the bankers to the bank. एमएसएमई क्या करती है, सॉरी सिडबी क्या करती है, सिडबी एक स्कीम लॉन्च करती है और उस स्कीम के अंतर्गत बैंक्स को फंडिंग करती है, कमर्शियल बैंक्स को फंडिंग करती है, एंड कमर्शियल बैंक्स प्रोवाइड द फंडिंग अंडर द scheme of SIDBI and get the reverse funding from SIDBI. That's how the funding is done for MSME. हर माइक्रो स्मॉल मीडियम एंटरप्राइज, यस, हर माइक्रो स्मॉल मीडियम एंटरप्राइज वाले बंदे को सिडबी के पास डायरेक्टली जाने की आवश्यकता नहीं होती है. वी हैड डिस्कस्ड दिस इन डिटेल व्हेन इट वाज इन 11th स्टैंडर्ड स्मॉल स्केल सेक्टर. NABARD, that is the National Agricultural and Rural Development Bank, National Bank for Agricultural and Rural Development, that is NABARD. It is an apex institution for financing of agri and rural sector. अगर आपको एग्रो बेस्ड कुछ काम करवाना है, आपको रूरल सेक्टर में कुछ अगर सपोर्ट चाहिए, तो देयर NABARD is the apex body. Again, NABARD also doesn't fund the projects directly. NABARD also do the funding through the commercial banks only. The similar kind of thing we had discussed in the previous standard. NABARD provides both short-term and long-term credit through regional rural banks. It is concerned with policy planning and operation. That is what I was saying. That it does not do the funding directly. It is concerned with policy planning and operations relating to the agricultural credit and credit for other activities in rural India. It provides finance to financial institutions and not to the individuals. Am I right? Now, the next one, that is the new models of banking, the small finance banks and the payment banks. इनको हम थोड़ा सा कौन से बैंक से प्रोवाइड कराते हैं, ये सभी बैंक में अवेलेबल है. Yes, of course. NABARD will do the funding to the commercial banks, and commercial bank and cooperative banks will do the funding to the individuals. So this is how these different banks are being categorized. The new models, in fact, I want to talk about in more details on this. So this one will be talking in tomorrow's lecture at 7 o'clock. Thank you for today. कल होपफुली ज्यादा लोग आएंगे. Thank you. We'll meet tomorrow.